This might be the most amount of books that I've read in a month in like a very long time. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah. Welcome to the last week of January. I feel like January went by so slow but also so fast at the same time. I am clearly ready for Valentine's Day and February, even with my little pink pants. I actually read a lot of books this month. Like, this might be the most amount of books that I've read in a month in like a very long time. We read 9 books this month. That is crazy to me. I feel like I've just been so in my like cozy January reading era and I've been loving it. Some books on my TBR, on my physical TBR that I have just been wanting to get to. We've gotten through a lot of them. And I also was big into audiobooks this month. I think like 2 of them were audiobooks, the books that I read. If this is any indication of the year of reading we're gonna have, it is a very good sign. The first book I read or listened to through an audiobook on Spotify was None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is a thriller that was super popular when I was like scrolling through Spotify Premium's audiobook list. It was on there and it recommended so many times to me. I think I literally finished this one in like 2 days because it was just so good. I ended up giving it like 4.25 stars. Because with thrillers, it's really hard for me to give a thriller a 5-star. Thrillers all have some sort of formula, I guess, and I'm like theorizing from like page 1. I'm like, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, and just like throughout the whole entire book. And then like definitely by the middle point, I at least have like one of like the twists figured out in my head, and I'm usually right. I listened to it in an audiobook, as I said, and I highly recommend that format because it is free with Spotify Premium. 2 women meet on their 45th birthday and they both have 2 completely different lives. One woman has a podcast and the other woman is sort of like, we figure out her story throughout. Josie convinces Alex to put her on her podcast because Alex usually does podcasts on like women who've changed their lives, and Josie was like, what about, have you ever done it on someone who's about to change their life? And then Alex was like, no. So that's when they started up, and with the audiobook, like it sounded like a podcast recording. The music and the intro and everything, that it literally sounded like a podcast during like the transcript chapters, and that was a really cool element that I love about audiobooks. I could definitely see why it's popular, and I figured out one twist, but literally the last chapter, it's that book that literally like you turn off and you're like, you stare at a wall because you're like, what's true? It's literally like the entire book you're trying to understand what's true and what's not, which is why it's called None of This Is True, I guess. But it was definitely a very gripping thriller and I highly recommend it because it does leave you with a little bit of an unsettled ending. Then on my Kindle, I read Redeemed by Lauren Asher. This is the 4th and final book in the Dirty Air series. And I think I have a video on it. And in that video, I said that I loved this book. I didn't love the whole Dirty Air series, but I really loved the 4th book. This is Santi and Chloe's story. Low-key giving Beauty and the Beast vibes. Chloe referred to Santi as like living in like a creepy castle, and he was like the scary grumpy guy that nobody saw ever. So it was very Beauty and the Beast-esque. And I read a lot of books with kids in it, and that doesn't usually happen, but this had a kid in it. It's Marco, which is Maya and Noah's kid from the first book, and Santi watches him, and then Chloe like pitches in to watch him, and then to make Maya and Noah feel better because they've been worried about Santi since he's gotten this like huge accident that ended his racing career. He starts like telling them that he's fake dating Chloe to make them think that he has his like life more together than he actually does. So it starts out as like a fake dating thing, and obviously we know how that evolves from there. Lauren Asher really did so well in like fleshing out the characters. Like Santi and Chloe had their own separate stories that made them their own interesting characters. So when they came together, that the fact that they both had like interesting backstories that I like cared about made the relationship portion so much better. So if you're like me and you didn't love the first 3 books in the Dirty Air series, definitely read the 4th book because I loved that one. Thinking back, I'm gonna give it like a 4.5 star. Like so close to 5-star, but I think a lot of it was just because like I wasn't really going into it expecting that I was gonna love it, and I really did. So I was happy about that. And the next book that I read is Daisy Hates the Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings. This is the 4th book in the Magnolia Parks universe that's out right now. Into the Dark is coming out literally next month. It's the second Daisy Hates book and the 4th book in like the Magnolia Parks universe. It takes place at the same time that Magnolia Parks Long Way Home does, but it's obviously from like Julian, Daisy, and Christian's point of views instead of BJ and Magnolia's point of view. This book, it's an infinity star for me. Honestly, I loved it so much. The same video that I have redeemed in, I have this book, and you could see all my live reactions because this book had me like crying, giggling, and just I didn't want to put it down. Even Daisy and Christian's story were so good in this. Of course, Julian's perspective was just like, oh my god, I cry. Just like thinking about some of the quotes in here and some of the things that Julian dealt with, I'm like getting emotional because it was so heartbreaking, but it also just made me feel so much emotion, and I love this series. I love Just Hastings writing, and I love this book, and I'm so happy that we get more Daisy books, but we won't get more Magnolia books after the next book, but we do get more Daisy books. The last few paragraphs on page 343 I kept on turning to because I was just like, I would read it and I would like, my heart would break all over again. Also, Christian and Magnolia had a lot of funny parts in this. Like, I was laughing out loud at some of the parts in this. And then started this book actually like last year, and it took me months to get through because it is a self-help book. It's You're About Making Money, and I bought this book years and years and years ago. Last year I read Atomic Habits, and that's the first self-help book that I've read in years. So I decided that I would try to be like at least one self-help book a year, which doesn't sound like a lot at all because I much prefer like romance and fantasy. But I decided that I would read a self-help book at least one a year. So I picked this book up, and it just like did not hit. I think I gave it like 2 stars. It's weird to like rate a self-help book, but for me, like the concepts and the stuff that she mentioned in here, I just like wasn't really caring about. Like, I feel like this would have made a lot more of an impact on me if I was in my like hustle era, but right now I'm just like very much in my like cozy soft life era, and just the things that she was talking about in this book I did not connect with at all. If you are in that hustle era, this might have some good ideas for you, but for me, I just like, I don't know, I didn't really like it. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This is the special illustrated edition. It has the beautiful sprayed edges, except when I got it delivered, it came like there was a little rip in it. So I was a little bit upset, but I didn't return it because I took off the dust jacket, and I think I like just like the foiling on the book and like the sprayed edges even without the dust jacket. Like, I might just like display it on my bookshelf like this even without the dust jacket, because the dust jacket is pretty, but like this is beautiful. And this is the special illustrated edition. So I haven't had a chance to flip through it because this is a book that I did read on audiobook, and then when I finished it, because I loved it so much, I immediately bought the special edition. But I have to flip through all of the pictures because it does have some beautiful photos and illustrations on here. I am so obsessed with this book. I gave it 5 stars because it was so heartbreaking. It made me cry, but I loved the story so much. I was so connected to the characters. It was a little bit like slow in the beginning, but because it was like through an audiobook, like I didn't mind. This is not a spoiler because it's in like the synopsis. But when Henry remembers Addie, it was March 13th, and that's my birthday. So I was like, oh my god, this is a sign. Like, I need to just buy the book. I understand why it is so popular. I don't know why it took me so long to read. It's been out for like almost 10 years, I think. It's been out for a while, and I just have always heard about it, but I was like, it doesn't really seem like my vibe. But I really liked it. I think it's a fantasy, I'm not sure, but I think it's considered a fantasy. Basically about Addie, and she makes a deal in 1700s, and it basically makes no one able to remember her. Flash forward to 2014, 300 years later, and then Henry, someone finally remembers her, and it's the bookshop keeper. The story unfolds from there because she's like, I spent 300 years and no one remembers me. Like, how do you remember me? I was heartbroken by the ending, but I also felt like satisfied by it because I also kind of knew that this certain person that was mentioned in the very beginning was gonna play like a reoccurring role, and his role I was questioning throughout the whole book. I just was like questioning his intentions, and that made me like so gripped to it, and I was questioning how this character's story was gonna unfold, along with, you know, Addie, how Addie's story was gonna unfold. Highly recommend this book if you ever thought about reading it. The next book I read is Killer Instinct by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is the second book in the Natural series, which is like a young adult Criminal Minds type mystery series. and I read The Naturals last year, and I have heard that this book, Killer Instinct, was people's favorites that I've read the whole entire series, and I could definitely see why. I really like this book. I ended up giving it like a solid 4 stars because it wasn't anything like amazing, but it was my favorite compared to the first one, and I really liked the first one. It was fun, it was fast-paced, I finished it in literally a day, and I really liked learning more about Dean's story. The romance was there, but it wasn't like super overwhelming, I guess. And they definitely still really mainly focused on the crime they were working on. And I loved all the characters in this book. This is just a really good world to get into when you just want something like fast and fun. Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This is the last book in the Dreamland Billionaires trilogy, Callahan and Alana's story. It's also very thick. I gave this book 4.5 to 4.75. I was so happily surprised. This is another story that has a kid in it, Cammy the kid. It was so fun that she was included in it because basically it's second chance romance. Cal has to go back to Lake Wisteria to fulfill his part of the inheritance that his grandfather left for him. He has to basically like sell the house. Goes there and he finds out that his one true love that he left years ago was living there with her kid. You know, they ended on very bad terms. The entire town pretty much hates him, but he's like, I have to do this. He can't tell her why, but he has to do it because that's how him and his brothers get his inheritance. I really loved the way that Lauren Asher did the second chance in this book. I feel like I was connected to Cal and connected to Alana because all throughout the first couple books, Cal was of course mentioned because he's the second brother, but he was always like sort of like happy and goofy, and then in his book you sort of got more of like the depth to Cal, which I really, really appreciated. Yeah, it was so good. And now we finished the Dreamland Billionaire series. The 8th book I read is Ghosted by J.M. Darhauer. This is another second chance romance, and this is another book with a kid in it. And it's also coming out in a mood reading vlog that I think I'm posting next week. A book that I've had on my physical TBR for over a year, I think. I can't believe this book was just sitting on my shelf, like staring at me, because I was obsessed with this book. Told in the past and present perspective. The past perspectives are told through basically Kennedy's journal entries, and then the present perspectives are dual point of view between Jonathan and Kennedy in like, you know, normal text. I really like that distinction between past and present because when books have dual point of views and also have like a past and present timeline, it gets a little bit confusing. But the way that J.M. Darhauer separated them flowed just so well together, and I was never confused. Whatever we learned about the past always went well with whatever was happening in the future or like the current time. Jonathan and Kennedy met in high school. They were high school sweethearts, and then Jonathan wanted to be an actor, but Kennedy was pregnant with their daughter, and now she's 6 years old and it's 6 years later. Jonathan has tried to come back every now and then to like meet his daughter, but because of how terribly him and Kennedy left off when Kennedy was pregnant, Kennedy has never really given him a second chance, or because she's like, you broke my heart, there's no way that I'm letting you break my daughter's heart because you're just gonna disappear again type thing. So he's like a famous like Marvel level actor, and he gets injured, not like filming or traveling around for like a couple months, so he is stuck in their hometown, and it gives the perfect opportunity for Madison, the girl, to meet him, and for Kennedy and Jonathan to like talk out everything. It was just so sweet. I was literally gasping out loud, and my boyfriend was like, are you okay? Because there were just random parts where I would like be gasping and I would be crying. And this book, it's not like anything super amazing as far as like the tropes or anything like that, but it's just the way that J.M. Darhauer read it and the characters, and I loved it. I very much love this book. I feel like it's very underrated. Highly, highly, highly recommend you pick this book up because it was just such a good second chance romance book. And then the last book that I read was actually an audiobook, and I just finished it yesterday. It is Never Lie by Frida McFadden. This is a psychological thriller that, again, is free on Spotify Premium, and I finished it in like 2 days. I think that I really like listening to thriller audiobooks because it's like you're watching like a thriller, psychological thriller movie, and I feel like it like has more of an effect than if I was just reading it. I did figure out the twist at the end. I suspected it. Well, there were a few things that I suspected, and I was right about one of the things that I figured out pretty early on. I haven't really decided on a rating yet because I just finished it yesterday. Right now, my feeling is maybe like a 3. It's a good thriller, but I've read better thrillers. Like None of This Is True was so much more gripping to me, or like I connected, I guess, more to the story or something like that. It is also told between past and present, And there's this couple, Ethan and Trisha. They are newlyweds, they're house hunting. They find themselves snowed in this house of a late famous psychologist who went missing, and no one really knows what happened to the psychologist, Adrian. And so they're in her house, and it's like a creepy big house. And you know, of course, Trisha starts hearing like weird noises and things like that, and she gets nervous. And they also had like a very relatively short relationship timeline before they got married. I feel like Frida McFadden puts a lot of like red herrings to cast suspicion over a lot of things throughout the book, which should like confuse you. And I will say, she had me. I really thought that a certain character was untrustworthy. But I was also correct at like the big reveal, the second big reveal, I guess. Maybe it's because I was like listening to it, so I like heard more things that I would have missed if I was reading it. I'm not sure. But that book was just like, it was good for like being a thriller. A 3-star is a good thriller. It wasn't like anything super crazy, but I did enjoy reading it. Those are all 9 of the books that I read and listened to in the first month of 2024. Definitely can say that we have a lot of new favorites. I think that my favorite ones are Ghosted, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and then of course Daisy Hates The Great Undoing. And I am already into reading for February and like reading more romances for Valentine's Day and everything like that. That is my January wrap up. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.